And good evening and welcome to my regular live stream. I'm Ruth from Top Schools, and you're very welcome. If you are interested in Hong Kong international schools or UK independent schools, you're in the right place. And so tonight I'm actually keen on discussing fees. I'll answer any of your questions about anything else as well. So if you do have any questions, this is what happens during this session. I'll answer them live. And it's interesting. It does get very interesting. I'm very happy to answer questions about fees in particular this evening. So I did a little trailer video. I don't know if you happen to see that, but welcome if you're watching live and welcome if you're watching on replay. So I can see some people coming in now. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and a few different places as well. Do you have any questions for me about international schools in Hong Kong or Singapore, or UK independent schools, or do you have particularly questions about fees? So sometimes it takes a while for the comments to come in. It feels like a Monday today, doesn't it? Even though, because we had a holiday yesterday, which was nice. I've had a busy day today. So I was visiting a couple of different schools. I'm off to the UK next week. So I've been trying to get some school visits in before they close as well for the holidays. So thank you to those schools who've had me to visit. I've got some content in the works that will come out about that in the next couple of weeks. So any questions about fees? If not, shall I make a start? This is not the nicest topic that I need to cover, and it does get a little bit technical, and I don't have any visual aids. I've got lots of content that I've published in the past, which I can put the links to later on. So let's talk about tuition fees to begin with. When parents are considering a school and they are evaluating what the school costs, one of the most important criteria is the tuition fees. However, the tuition fees are not the whole story when it comes to being able to afford private education in Hong Kong. And there are a few websites. Now, if you don't know, all of our international schools are private. And then there are some other schools that we work closely with that you might be interested in, which are not international, but they still are private. This does create a little bit of confusion amongst parents, but I'm going to try and keep this simple. So all schools are regulated by the Education Bureau. They are all subject to legislation. I forget the exact reference now, but you can go and Google that. It's the Education Ordinance, I think. And it's long and there's lots of different bits to it. But within the Education Ordinance, there is a section on fees. And the Education Bureau, being the regulatory body for all of our private schools and non-private schools, regulate the fees. That's one of the major areas that they regulate. So as parents, there is a useful document, which I can put the link to, and I've talked about this before, which is the fees certificate. Now, you as parents, I would advise you to go and look at the fees certificate for the schools that you are interested in, and make sure that what they publish on the website in terms of their tuition fees matches the fees certificate. Now, it normally does. It almost always does. That's not what I'm frustrated about. The tuition fees are subject to increase every single year. There was a side chat in the group this couple of days ago where a parent was asking, do tuition fees increase every year? Yes, they do, every single year, especially because they were frozen for a few years during COVID. So fees increase, tuition fees increase every single year 2 to 9%. There's been one or two occasions where it's been 10%. But you can bet your bottom dollar that whatever you're paying this year is going to increase by 2 to 9% every single year. So you might want to calculate for the period that your child will be in school. However, I'm not too concerned about tuition fees. It's relatively transparent. It more or less has been. The issue I have is that on that fees certificate, And I've got a little video where I show you how to find that fees certificate. But on that fees certificate, there are a few key sentences in the bottom, in the notes. Always read the small print. And it says that if the fees, what does it say? I'm paraphrasing, but it basically says the schools are not allowed to charge any amount of money to the parents if that amount is not written on the fees certificate. Okay, that's what it said. The school was not allowed to charge anything else. They could charge what was written on the fee certificate, but that was all that they were allowed to charge. That's what it said. But that's not what was happening. For years, that was not what was happening. Schools were charging all sorts of fees in addition to what was printed on the fee certificate for years. They were charging application fees. They were charging debentures. They were charging capital levies. They were charging all sorts of different fees that were not printed on the fee certificate. And they were not actually allowed to charge them. But apparently, nobody took any notice of this until about 2020. And in 2020, an ombudsman review was conducted. Usually the ombudsman reviews are they're sort of tip-offs. They had enough complaints over a number of months or years that they eventually decided to investigate. And so investigate is what they did. And they published a report, which I can link to, which I've discussed in detail at length, that made some recommendations. Now, unfortunately, the ombudsman can only make recommendations. That's all they can do. And they're actually investigating the Education Bureau as the regulatory body and holding the Education Bureau to task and saying, well, actually, you haven't been doing this. You should be doing this, that, and the other. And so there have been some changes, but to me, these changes are not satisfactory. So the changes are that in addition to the amounts that are printed on the fees certificate, the schools now need to apply for approval for all these other amounts, be it application fees or debentures. Furthermore, they need to apply for approval to be able to charge these amounts outside of the regulation timeline, which again, from memory, it states that you can't charge more than 30 days in advance. Now, all private schools, that's not feasible. That's not logistical. Logistics does not allow them to be able to do that. So they also need then approval to be able to charge these deposits, capital levies, entry fees, debentures, months and months in advance. So that is what has been happening fairly recently. I want to say maybe in the last year. But here's again where I'm frustrated, and there's no transparency. So we still have the fees certificate. We still have no confidence whatsoever that any of these additional fees are approved. We have to take the school's word for it that they're approved, which I don't find very satisfactory. Do you? Now, I've been on this. I've been on a little bit of a, a little bit of a project, shall we say. Many conversations with the Education Bureau, many frustrating. I've actually got to speak to a couple of really good people who really know what they're talking about, and they've escalated this to the policy division now, because the fact is the schools now need to apply for approval. They need to get the approval. They then receive approval letters, and these approval letters are secret. Well, some schools consider them to be secret. They should be displayed. They should be available for parents to view. Now, I said I've been to about 3 or 4 schools in the last couple of weeks, and I've been having a look. Some of the schools are displaying these in reception, which is what they should be doing, which is what the EDB is recommending. So when you walk into your school, here's a little homework project. Let's crowdsource this. Next time you go into the school that your children attend, have a look for the approval letters from the EDB that stipulate that they are approved to charge what they are charging. And these approval letters should be prominently displayed. I can't remember if the EDB says they should be displayed to parents One school I visited has it in their office, so it's not accessible to parents. A couple of schools do have it in reception. So common sense tells us that it should be visible for the public to be able to check. Because here's my issue, that the schools are publishing fees on their website. Are we to assume that all of these fees are approved? Well, I've been on this project for just a few days and I've only investigated 4 or 5 schools. I've already found one discrepancy. So that doesn't give me oodles and oodles of confidence. I don't know about you, but the process of trying to check every single school is the most frustrating, most laborious, most ridiculous process known to man, whereby the schools need to apply for approval. They need to get approval by way of a document, which we don't know if they have or not. And there's no way of knowing. We can physically walk into the school and see if they display it. Some do, some don't. So this is the project that I'm on at the moment. And this is what I just wanted to say to you, that, this is, parents don't really question, right? You're being asked to pay a lot of money, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Are the schools legitimately approved to be able to charge these? And here's another thing that they do, especially at this time of year, because if they're confirming students for entry in 2024, what they will do is they will ask you to put down a deposit or a capital levy at the 2024 level, which they've applied for but is not yet approved. So actually, they're only supposed to charge you at the 23-24 level, because that's what's approved. If they get the approval to do the increase in August, they can then charge you the difference, but they're not allowed to charge you that right here, right now. There was a school that got into trouble for that several years ago. Admin nightmare. I agree, from the school's point of view. Complete admin nightmare, but that's pretty much it. I hope that's useful. So go into your school, check with the schools that you're applying to. I'm really keen for more people to start asking, because I don't want to be the only one to be asking these questions. But we need to be asking these questions, and we need to be satisfied that these fees are approved. Because you know what will happen, like one of the kindergartens that closed down recently that was charging debenture, those parents are never going to see that debenture money again. Okay, the school's closing down because they're in financial difficulty. So where is all of that money that the parents paid several years ago? It's gone. Or it's going to be with the, in liquidators. So any questions about fees, or anything else? I can lighten the mood a little bit, but do you have any questions about tuition fees, debentures, capital levies, approval mechanisms? Do you know they're all needing to have approval for the application fees as well? Yeah, which is a good thing. It is progress. Don't get me wrong. They were all doing it. They were all charging. It was the Wild West. It still is. They charge whatever they want, basically. It's just that now they have to seek approval. And is this a rubber stamp job? Yes, probably, most likely. But at least we want to be confident that the schools have the approval, right? Don't we? Give me a thumbs up if you think that we should have, as parents, as prospective parents, we want to be confident. Because also, to me, do I want to put my child into an institution, an organization in which their integrity is questionable because they're actually charging an amount that we're not sure if they're approved or not? Thank you for the thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up. So do you have any questions about fees? I've got nothing else. That's it. That was my little rant for today. If you have any questions, if you're watching on replay and you want to ask anything, if you've got any questions about anything else, then please do ask. We're winding down. We're like 4 to 5 weeks until the end of term. We are full on in application mode for 2025 entry. So I'm feeling quite pleased with myself because we seem to be a little bit ahead of the curve, which is nice. But I know that it's going to be extremely busy for in August and September. We still have lots of families moving into Hong Kong, which is also nice. Do you have any questions? Well done to all of your children if they are taking exams just now, if they have just finished exams just now. I know that a lot of children are on study leave, and yeah, it's stressful. My daughter's taking exams just now, so just trying to stay out of the way. And well, she's not here, but trying to not create more stress for the children. So if there are no questions, it seems not for this evening. Thanks for all your questions last week. I really enjoyed that. So there we go. There's a little bit on fees. I will chop it up and maybe publish this. If any schools are watching, you know who you are. Actually, just a little addendum to this. If you work in a school, if you work in admissions, you are in the sales department. Thank you for your question, Venus. I'll get to it. If you work in admissions, you are in the sales department. And if you don't understand this, you should. If you do not understand the ins and outs of what it costs for a parent to enroll in their school, so if you do such a fantastic job, you show them around and you do all of the the communications, and you're in touch and you receive the application, then any questions about fees, I would hope that the admission staff would be on it and they would be able to answer. And I've been a little bit surprised at the lack of knowledge. Now, maybe they feel that this sits squarely with the finance department, but it doesn't. I mean, there needs to be some more, I think, a little bit more understanding. And I have to say also that the international schools have been having a series of meetings with the EDB where they get invited to these group meetings. They get briefed on this. But the private schools, not so much. So EDB views them a bit differently. And I feel like maybe there's a little bit of a missing link there where the private schools are slightly outside of or in the periphery of this, if you like. Let me have a look at your question, Venus. I haven't read it. Non-mandatory fees. Oh, good question. That's a good question. No, because they're not mandatory. I remember these sorts of fees when my kids were in kindergarten. This sounds like a bit more of a local school. No, they don't need approval for the non-mandatory fees, but then you can just not pay, right? But thank you for your question. It's not late. You got it in there. They need approval for tuition fees, capital levies, debentures, application fees, and they also need approval to charge them if that deviates from the legislation in any way. Okay, thank you for your question, Venus. Yeah, all those extra fees. So like things like your picnics or Christmas parties, bus, lunch, uniform. That's an interesting point. Is uniform a non-mandatory fee? And do they have approval to charge? Because that is an interesting question, because some of them use their own supplier, right? And some of them, and the uniform costs are eye-wateringly expensive, aren't they? I know that in the UK, for example, they sell the badge, which you would then sew onto the uniform that you buy in any regular clothing store. But the uniforms in Hong Kong are very, very expensive. And I was also talking with a couple of teachers a couple of weeks ago about uniform in mandatory. And in quite a few schools, it becomes not mandatory or not at all a thing really in the last 2 years, like either grade 11, 12 or year 12, 13. What do we think about uniform? We could have another chat about that. And we were talking about whether or not the girls can wear trousers. And then it became a question of, well, can the boys wear the skirts and that? So I thought that was quite interesting as well. But yeah, uniforms are necessary, but I'm not under the impression that they need any approval at the moment. But then again, that speaks to the whole integrity of, you want to look, I mean, oh gosh, I spend time looking at tracking down board members and people who sit on the board of certain schools have other companies that supply, this, that, and the other. And you know, there's a lot of that going on, if I'm honest. But we're not here to debate that. We were here to talk about fees. So I've been waffling on for about 22 minutes. Thank you for joining. I do this every Thursday at 6 p.m., almost every Thursday. On the 23rd, which I believe is next week, we have a guest, and we have Tony Darby from Rugby School in Japan. So I won't be answering questions. So again, if you have any questions, get them in now. Use the group. Also, some of you are in a side chat, which has got, I don't know, like maybe several hundred members. But if you come back into the group, we have over 30,000 members. So you're going to get like more engagement, more comments as well. So I've been Ruth from Top Schools. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Venus, for your question. And I'll see you next week with Rugby School Japan. Have a lovely evening. Good night.